On today's Locked On Texan podcast, which player or coach out there could be a sleeper addition nobody is talking about that can impact the Houston Texans in 2026?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Data Red Nation, from H-Town to your town. Today's episode and every episode of the Locked On Texans podcast is for Texan fans all around. Fun show lined up on this Monday edition to kick off the week. Joe Mixon over the weekend mentioned that, he's all vengeance, all 2026. Finally getting an opportunity to hear a little bit more from Joe Mixon on Instagram, might I add. Do you guys want to keep Joe Mixon around or not? Houston can save money, or they can bring back a vet that was monumental for them in 2024. Out on Joe Lombardi. You guys remember I mentioned Joe Lombardi being a possible addition to this coaching staff. Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos says not so fast. And I want to open up today's show just looking at, could trading for a wide receiver help Houston? We know that they need established players. We know that this offense needs explosiveness. We also know those with a working mind understand that, hey, banking on Tank Dell is unfair to Tank Dell and unrealistic for the Houston Texans offense. Is there a player out there that you guys would absolutely love, or at least the idea of Houston bringing in from another team? This is an opportunity to talk about who's out there, right? But I am your Texas credential media member and football analyst, John Hickman. Shout out to my everydayers from the Himalayas for making the Locked On Texan podcast your first listen of the day, and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network family, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the app, the Game Time app. Create an account and use code Locked On for $20 off your purchase. Now, it's important to talk about and jump right into it. I think Jordan Addison could be a great addition for the Houston Texans, currently with the Minnesota Vikings. So, yes, the Houston Texans would have to trade for Addison. A third rounder, I think, would get it done. It feels like the marriage between Minnesota and Addison is all but over with, right? The Texans don't have to take on a huge salary to get him, which boosts his trade appeal, in my opinion. $4.6 million owed in 2026. Houston could also essentially control what the next couple of years will look like if they want to bring him back. We got to also understand that Houston is operating in what we all consider widely to be a championship window, right? And so you look at trading for Jordan Addison, the final year of his rookie deal. What would you get? A young, explosive wide receiver who is an inside receiver. I'm putting emphasis on he is a inside receiver. He lined up more outside, I think nearly 3 times more outside than inside. I mentioned his explosiveness. He's a 14.5 yards per catch player. Drops were a problem this past season. Could be a change of scenery fix, right? And he be coming to a team that practices and preaches some similar philosophies from a schematic standpoint in some areas. 6th in the league in average depth of target. I think that's an important number to mention. But I also like the idea of Romeo Doubs to Houston. But I'll dive a little bit more into that. Why do I like Jordan Addison to Houston? Well, you look at what he offered as a wide receiver too, right? The first 2 years as a wide receiver too, 1,600 yards, 19 touchdowns. That's playing alongside Justin Jefferson. Nico Collins is not Justin Jefferson, and I'm not saying that, but Nico Collins is a wide receiver 1A in the league. However you want to look at it, I think he's in that mid-second tier. When you start looking at 7, 8, 9, and 10, I think that's where you can potentially place a Nico Collins. I don't think he slips under 11. Right, so Jordan Addison would essentially come into a role where he's already comfortable being. And that's a wide receiver 2 in the NFL, right? And I also like what that'll do for Higgins and Noah moving forward. I think Higgins is the contingency plan for Nico Collins. I really do, and I think that once we get into the following year with more chemistry under his belt with C.J. Stroud, we'll see him blossom a little bit more, right? And I also think that Jalen Noah could be a contingency plan for just a wide receiver 5 position altogether. It could be a contingency plan for Tank Dell or Xavier Hutchinson. But what I like about Addison and his potential addition to this team, as Houston would have to trade for him, is he would be a type of player that can open things up for the guys around him, right? You have to account for his explosiveness downfield. You have to account for his downfield. I think he had 22 downfield targets this year, 20 or more. You have to account for that if you're a defense. And I think that will take pressure off the young guys who are still trying to find their way in the league, especially when I look at what he'd be able to do and open up for Jaden Higgins. Now, that would also make the transition easier back into the game for a Tank Dell, who we love a lot here on the show. You guys love him in the fan base. He's loved around the city of Houston. But that would allow for things to continue to go through a slow process. Why do I keep mentioning that for Tank Dell? Like, why do I keep bringing up Houston needs to put him on a slow process? For Tank Dell, and I'm sure his agent may be saying the same thing, this season could potentially be that first step of the last shot for Dale for a contract extension or a second contract with another team, right? And so the one thing that Tank Dale personally doesn't want to do is jeopardize his money and his future by rushing back. And you can make the case for the Houston Texans on the opposite side. Money wouldn't be what's jeopardized, but offensive production, field production. The ability to get a first down, to get an explosive play, to get into the red zone and be, to be able to put up points. So I think value for value is what the Houston Texans and Tank Dell should very much so consider in his progress back to the field, right? And Jordan Addison would allow for a player, which, by the way, like Kevin O'Connell, Minnesota, Kevin O'Connell comes from where? The Rams. You look at how, again, Addison can come step into the role here in Houston and know maybe some of the terminology. And I think that'd be great. And also, this would be one of those similar home run type of moves for Houston where it isn't a CeeDee Lamb, or it isn't a George Pickens. It isn't one of those type of receivers or players, but it's a move where down the line you can go back in 2026 and say, look at the impact Jordan Addison is having. The same thing we have been able to say for Ed Ingram. Has he been placed in the top 5 or top 6 or 7 of guards? No, but he's played in a major role, and I think that's what could help Houston tremendously moving forward. Plus, I just like Jordan Addison. I think again, I don't want to downplay his explosiveness, but I do like the idea of Romeo Doubs to Houston. But I think that's just what it is. It's an idea. He'd be projected to be somewhat priced out of what I think Houston would want to spend. And because of that, compared to the other glaring needs, he wouldn't be a priority in terms of money, right? I think he'd probably be around $15 to $20 million a year. But Dobbs is nice. Addison will cost, Houston a day 2 pick. Houston has 4 top 100 picks plus 2 fourth-round picks. I think there'd be value in making that trade, and I still think that being able to address other holes on this offense would not take away from that. Also, with Houston operating in this championship window, it could put them in a situation where they want value instantly and reliability instantly and experience over development and young player mistakes. That also moves me to the defensive side of the ball where does Rasul Douglas become a sexy name for Houston? A cheap 1-year deal. He was excellent in Miami. He's getting up in age, but only allowed 430 yards last season on a 54% completion percentage. Clearly, Houston's defense is already at an advantage without Douglas. Adding him eliminates back-end issues and is a major upgrade over Tremont Smith. Houston still has Jalen Smith, who they like a lot, but could an outside coach help the offensive situation? If so, keep in mind the right voice matters for the Houston Texans. They can't just hire any old body and expect for CJ Stroud to grow and progress and develop, or the rest of the young guys on this offense to grow and progress and develop. They need to bring in a voice that matters and has the resume to back it up. That's what we're going to talk about on the following segment, and how that person will not, or could not, or maybe in so many ways should not be Joe Lombardi. The big game is almost here. There's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And this week, Prize Picks has a special max discount for the big game live in the app right now. Drake May just needs one passing yard for the max discount to win. Add another player to your lineup, and if your picks hit, you cash in instantly. Prize Picks is super simple to use. It takes no time to get started. The social feed features is awesome. You can share lineups and even copy lineups from winners with one click. Download the Prize Pick app today and use code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, where it is good to be right. And also, Texas fans, perfect time to talk about drip drop kicking off the year. Feeling good is always the goal, right? And honestly, hydration is the easiest win. When I stay on top of it, my energy, my focus, my mood levels all go up. But let's be real, plain water doesn't always cut it for many, especially when you're grinding through long days, hitting the gym, or just trying to stay consistent with your health goals. That's where Drip Drop comes in. Doctor Develop, proven fast hydration that helps your body and mind work together. Think clear, focus, better energy, elevated mood, even that fresh skin glow. I love that it uses a precise ratio of electrolytes and glucose for rapid absorption, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading sports drinks. Can't beat that. Drip Drop's science-backed formula is trusted by firefighters who don't trust firefighters, medical professionals, and over 90% of top college and pro teams because it rehydrates you faster and more effectively than water alone. So right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners, our Texan fans out there, 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code Locked On NFL. That's dripdrop.com, promo code Locked On NFL for 20% off. Stock up now at dripdrop.com and use promo code Locked On NFL. Welcome back, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. We're going to dive into a very important conversation. I was in support of Joe Lombardi when I found out that, hey, Sean Payton and the Broncos said, kick rocks, bucko. But my man, Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos heard me talking about Joe Lombardi and has some good insight on his time with Sean Payton. Let's hear from my man, Cody.
If you want to know about former Broncos offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi, here's everything you need to know about his time in Denver. Obviously, knowing Sean Payton, they've had a previous relationship over 15 years coaching together. Sean Payton made the decision to fire him. But here's the deal. Lombardi was the labeled offensive coordinator, but he did not call plays. He didn't construct the offensive game plan. He didn't put anything together. More so, he was up in the box as an assistant to Sean, where Sean would ask him what fronts he's seeing. Lombardi would be someone who dictates or calls out what personnel, what coverages the opposing team is in. He never really called plays. He didn't have any hand in the development of Bo Nix in any way, shape, or form compared to Sean Payton or quarterbacks coach Davis Webb. So really, Lombardi, his time in Denver has been more so viewed as kind of this yes man position for Sean Payton. So it's very unclear what his potential role would be for any other NFL franchise that is looking for his services. So on top of that, I would say probably not an ideal fit right now. He'll probably take some time off and evaluate his options here going forward. But yes, in Denver, he was not a play caller. He was not monumental in any part of the offensive game plan. That was all Sean Payton.
Perfect there from my man, Cody. And I really appreciate that. Great insight from my dog. I wanted to discuss this because I was intrigued by the name, right? You guys heard me talk about it last week and say, hey, Joe Lombardi, he's coming from that Sean Payton. Look what they were able to do with, Drew Brees, taking back to Drew Brees, getting Bo Nix to a place where he is. And then you hear Cody, who spends a lot of time around the Broncos, and that's done so for, I think, nearly a decade now, say things like no hand in Nick's development, right? And I lack knowledge about Lombardi's role. I just love the name and I love the attachment to Sean Payton, regardless about regardless of how you feel about Sean Payton, he's a great offensive mind, one of the greatest offensive minds in the last 35 years, right? So he holds weight, and I thought Lombardi would be a part of that. But obviously, when you hear Cody say things like no role, no hand in Nick's development, that's scary. But here's why I wanted to discuss this. People want Case Keenum back in some type of advisory role because of Stroud's 2023 magic. But people are forgetting Shane Day had a major role in that offense in 2023. Why am I mentioning Shane Day? They had the resume, right? They had the Herbert and helping getting him over the edge, right? They had the resume of I work with young quarterbacks and I get them to where they need to be. Houston needs a guy with the resume and the proof. And in terms of quarterbacking, the Texans don't have that guy, guys. Like, that's a problem right now for the Houston Texans. Kelly is good for the tight ends. We saw Dalton Schultz, have a resurgence this past season, right? And it's sad that we don't get an opportunity to talk about, maybe a Brevin Jordan or another tight end because of injuries, which is why I think Houston will absolutely address it. They may shock us all and pick a tight end with the first 2 picks. They really may do that, and I wouldn't blame them. But they got Caley, and he was good for tight ends. Cole Popovich, great for the O-line, right? He helped revitalize Ed Ingram's career, and I was on a downslope until Houston traded for him. I think got the most out of Andrews. He wasn't great, but he got the most out of him. And really, you got to look at Houston's future left tackle, who's going to be a Pro Bowl or All-Pro at some point. I believe so. Helping get him along to where he is, right? Also with the addition of Titus Howard and Trent Brown, but like Pop was great for the O-line. Those were the changes that worked in 2024, from 2024 to 2025, right? Going into the 2025 year, Houston moves on from Stroud, so they fire Bobby Sloor. Can we see somewhat of an improvement in their background or their coaching? I am curious to see how Houston addresses, in my opinion, this glaring need of either a new quarterback coach. Gerard Johnson is returning back to Houston. Didn't get the Eagles job, and I thought that I thought Philly was going to do the job for Houston. Or an offensive assistant with the resume and the DNA of a successful offensive background quarterback development. Houston needs that guy on their coaching staff. Smart teams would do, and this is where it frustrates all of us with the Houston Texans, guys. It's like at times they try to outsmart everybody else, and at times they end up outsmarting themselves, and it hurts them in the long run. I mean, it really does at times. And when you look at some successful teams around the NFL, they add to their quarterback for various different reasons. Number one, if you have a quarterback, and when you get your quarterback to a point where they're in that top 10 conversation, market is better. Butts are in the seats. Ticket sales are going up, right? But obviously, you're looking at a quarterback that is, if that's a top 10 quarterback and have a healthy season, that quarterback can drag you to the playoffs. That quarterback can lift the team around you and things of that nature. Houston had that in 2023 in several ways, like Nico Collins' breakout year, CJ Stroud. Right, but what happened in 20? Shane Day was around. So, like, these are the things that the Houston Texans need to consider when making additions and changes to their coaching staff, simply because the smart teams do it. And they were a smart team in 2023. Shane Day leaves, and they don't replace him with a guy that can continue what he built on. And since 2023, you want to talk about regression, people point to Gerard Johnson, obviously because he's the quarterback coach. But in a lot of ways, I think we overlooked the impact and role they had. Now, Chad O'Shea would have been great, but he's in Kansas City now. A name that I would look into, this is just me doing my research, another Lombardi, Mick Lombardi, I think would be a great hire for Houston. Plus, we know how much relationships matter for the Houston Texans. Kaylee and Mick spent time together with the New England Patriots. You guys may not want to hear that. I know you're tired of hearing the Patriots South. I'd be tired too if I were in your position. But I just look at what this team traditionally has done since Caserio has arrived. And it ain't been all bad. Like, like I said, Cole Popovich has been great for you guys. They've been great for the offensive line. So if you can get a person in the building with the resume and the ability to help coach up guys or the offense and convey the message and be an extension of the offensive coordinator, I think that would be a plus. And that's something the Houston Texans should consider at some point now. Joe Mixon, was on Instagram. He said, all vengeance, all 2026. 2026, the vengeance year for Joe Mixon. And if so, is it in Houston or is it somewhere else? I mean, that's a conversation that we absolutely got to have. So let's have it right now. More Locked On Texans talk in a moment. There's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, could be a hassle at times, right? That part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, and that's with us, the people, the fans. Being able to see the view from the seat before buying tickets has made decision-making so much easier. Plus, great last-minute options, too, with NBA tickets showing up at solid prices. Everything feels quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. Also, Texas fans, and listen, new year, new systems, right? This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts on how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. Your team, your whole team, can call and text from one shared business number, so nothing ever gets missed. It works right from your phone or computer, and you can even keep your existing phone number. It's no surprise Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses. More than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. I mean, they're trusted by over 90,000 businesses, guys. Make this year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free plus 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnfl. That's quo.com/lockedonnfl. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. Closing out today's episode, I do want to let you guys know that this week officially kicks off the Everyday Club. Thank you for tuning in to the Locked On Texans podcast first, right? Throughout the week, we'll get back to some draft talk. I got a guest on throughout the week to talk about what happened at the Senior Bowl, things that you guys absolutely need to be privy about. And it feels like with the first pick, the Houston Texans may take Caleb Banks. I mean, my goodness, the D tackle with Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter, that'd be crazy, right? Make sure you subscribe and follow to the Locked On Texans podcast so you get all of the latest episodes. If you never miss an episode, the Everyday Club is built for you. Get Locked On Texans ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to the LockedOnTexans.supercast to join the club. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 National NBA YouTube channel as well. On audio, make sure you listen to your second Locked On NFL. But we got to close out today's show just talking about where the future of the Houston Texans at running back lie. First and foremost, it's good to see, and I thought voters got it wrong in the first place, but it's good to see Hawk and Lock together. experiencing the Pro Bowl, right? You look at why this defense is so crazy. They don't got to worry about Kamari Lassiter for 2 more seasons. I mean, essentially, they got to worry about him now and what the market is going to look like in terms of money, but contractually, he's on a contract for 2 more seasons, I believe, for Houston Texans. Caleb Bullock, they got him for a little minute, man. They gotta strike now while the iron is hot. And they do a very good job of being an extension off the best players. I mean, you look at the best players for the Houston Texans, Will, Sting, Daniil, those guys are extensions of them. That's why this defense is so damn good. But Joe Mixon posted on IG a picture of himself with CJ Stroud, all 26, vengeance, right? And let's talk about that for a moment. Let's talk about that. Casario did mention that if healthy, Houston would love to bring Mixon back since he's under contract through next season. Then again, the Texans could save $8 million against their already tight cap space if they were to release the former Pro Bowler this season. The question is, and this is the question we'll talk about throughout the offseason, should Houston and Mixon keep this love thing going? Once again, I say no to that. Casario said if he is healthy, I think there is still so much uncertainty surrounding that freak accident that will impact the 30-year-old running back. Love Joe Mixon for what he's done for the Houston Texans. And on the squad show, you look at Joe Mixon's career. Look, I loved what Joe Mixon has done for young quarterbacks in the run game as a running back. But it's similar to like Tank Dell's situation. It's unfair to expect and even want Joe Mixon to have to perform at that high level once he returns if Houston don't fix that offensive line. But, and here's the thing, like Woody Marks was fairly good for Houston this year, but he only rushed for 700 yards. And so we talk about why things broke down and, you know, the issues of this offense and is it Nick Kelly or who else it is. It's just like, they'll look at the teams that are in the Super Bowl right now. 2 teams that can run the ball very well. I think Seattle rushes the ball for 4.1 yards per carry. So from a team perspective, that's not great. But they had 2 running backs, Kennedy Walker, 4.6 yards per carry, Charbonnet, 4 yards per carry. They combined for 17 touchdowns. They combined for 1,800 yards. And they're in the Super Bowl. So the pressure on CJ Stroud, justifiable. I mean, obviously, you know, you look at the issues with how he ended the last 2 games, but that last game specifically, they couldn't run the ball. And Joe Mixon won't change that, in my opinion, with Andrews and the rotation at left guard. Houston had 5 different left guards this season. That's not going to change. And the question is, where is the real value for the team moving forward? And it is absolutely comparing, if I compare Mixon to where Houston needs that $8 million, it's up front. They need it up front so they can run the ball. Because honestly, I think Woody Marks is an RB2 in this league, and I think he'll be a very successful RB2. I don't even want to call him a change of pace back. I think he can do everything a starting running back can do, just not at a high level as maybe some, like if Joe Mixon was healthy this year, he'd been perfect for to back up Joe Mixon. But if you put Joe Mixon in that situation where a D tackle is already in his face, in his lap, he's not doing much. Not as much as I think he may have done in the past. It is unfair to ask of Joe Mixon to always constantly erase negative plays because that's what he did in 2024. Before the injury, before the freak injury that we still have no clue about, before 30. Can he do it again moving forward? We're not sure, But what we do know for certain is Houston's offense needs reshaping from the center position, from the left guard position. Again, it baffles me that you guys want to stick Titus Howard at left guard when he is a tackle and he does not provide what the Texans need in the run game. It baffles me, but that's just me. And Houston could very well use that $8 million to go to those positions and give another younger running back or a cheaper vet running back opportunity to get to the line of scrimmage and not have to make a play before they even get to the line of scrimmage because they got a guy in their lap. The Texans need to strongly consider moving on from Joe Mixon. I know they like Mixon a lot. I know he's well loved in the building. But this is one of those things where it feels like business. And it could hurt Houston if they keep him. And the money that they could use towards not only left guard, but other positions, keep them at the divisional round ceiling. They can't get past that ceiling. Thank you for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcasts. And follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. Until next time, ladies and gents, Texas fans across the nation, peace.